Hello, what's up YouTube? Ronnix with an outro, and this is going to be a high-end skin retouching tutorial, and we're going to be learning everything from the very start to the very end in the shortest time possible. I know I have a very long tutorial about skin retouching, and it's going to be a little bit beginner friendly for you, but this is going to be a more quicker and easy to follow and straight to the point tutorial. So right now I'm in the camera interface, and this is camera 12.1, and information about this image taken using Canon 6D camera, which is a raw file. I shot it at 160 ISO using my 85mm lens, and I shot it at f4 at the shutter speed of 1 out of 200th of a second. So right now in the camera filter, what I want to do, I want first of all do the basic adjustments to this image before doing the skin retouching. So usually I first of all correct the lighting or any color inconsistencies in my photos before retouching them in Photoshop. So usually what I do, I take my highlights down and I do the same for my whites, just like that, to get back information in the image. Then I come and add contrast within the photo around 6, and I take my blacks down and open up my shadows just like that. Then I'm also going to add a little bit of exposure to this photo. I think this looks good, and I add clarity within the image, and this is all I do. And since my image has a little bit more of the reds, I'm just going to slightly take it down. Remember, the opposite of red is green, so I'm just going to move the slider towards the greens. And after doing that, I'm just going to come to open in order to open my image into Photoshop to do the skin retouching process. So it is going to take a short while, and the Photoshop version I'm going to be using for this tutorial is Photoshop 2020 right here. For those that always ask me about which Photoshop I'm using, and I'm on computer. For those that tend to ask if at all I'm on maybe phone or anything. So right now I'm using Photoshop 2020, and right now we have this very nice and beautiful image. So I'm going to be learning about skin retouching using a technique known as frequency separation. And before we can do anything, if at all you're watching and haven't hit the like button, make it a point that you hit the like button so that people who are new to Photoshop can get this video through the recommendation process by YouTube. When this video gets more likes, so it is going to recommend it to more people out there. So right now we're going to be learning about frequency separation. Frequency separation is a skin retouching technique that is going to divide the image into two. So it is going to get this image and divide it between the colors and the skin textures or the details embedded in it. So that when you combine both layers, you're going to be ending up with this image as a whole. So in order to do that, we're just going to create those two layers by simply coming and selecting Ctrl Command J on the keyboard. So I'm just going to come and hit Ctrl J or Command J twice. Sorry about this. Just going to hit Ctrl J twice on the keyboard to create those two layers, and I'm going to come right here and name the middle layer into low frequency, and I'm going to name this to high frequency. So after doing that, I'm going to come and select the low frequency layer and turn off the high frequency layer by clicking on the eye icon. Then simply come to filter, blur, and come to Gaussian blur. So what I want to do, I only want to remain with the colors in the low frequency layer or the skin tones. So in order to do this, when you come to filter, blur, and come to Gaussian blur, you're going to get this window open for you. And now what you have to do, you have to zoom and look for an area that has more prominent skin textures than the rest of the image. And I think this is the reference image we have to use for this case. So you have to move this radius up to a point when you're just starting to lose out on these details. So just stop at that point right when you're starting to lose out on the details in this area. So since we have this as a reference point and it has majority of the textures, when we lose out on these textures, it means that we are going to be losing out on the rest of the textures in the image. So just going to start moving the radius, and like I always say, don't cram this radius, just move it up that point when you're just starting to lose out on those details. So I think 8.0 is fine. So after doing that, just come and hit OK right there, and after hitting OK, you're going to come back to the high frequency layer. And what you have to notice now, the image is looking a little bit blurry. So when you come to the high frequency layer and select it, make sure you activate it by turning back the eye icon. So in the high frequency layer, we only want to remain with the textures or the details within the skin. And in order to remain with those details, we're just going to come right here to image and come down to apply image. So when you come to apply image, you have to take into consideration the bit depth of your image so that you can apply the right frequency separation to your photo in Photoshop. So when you come to this apply image window right here, we have to select the layer from which we are going to be subtracting the details from. And for this case, we're going to be subtracting the details from the low frequency layer. So just come and select low. You select that layer from which you are subtracting. And since we have a 16-bit image, come to the invert option, make sure it is not turned on, and come to the blending mode and change it to add. Opacity at 100, make sure preserve transparency and mask are not checked. The scale has to be 2 and offset 0 right here. Then after doing all that, just come and invert this option. So when you invert, you can see the details are going to be on this kind of 50% gray layer. That is for a 16-bit image. But if at all you have 8 right here, what you have to do, make sure the invert option is not turned on, and come and change the blending mode to subtract. Make sure the opacity is 100, the scale is 2, offset 108. The reason for that is because we are just dividing the colors in the RGB. You can see right here we have RGB. We're just dividing those colors by 2, and those colors are usually 256. So 256 divided by 2, you get 128 right here. So make sure opacity is at 100, preserve transparency and mask are not checked, and also the invert option is not checked, and you can hit OK. You can still have the same result. So when I'm dealing with a 16-bit image, I have to come and ensure that a blending mode is add, opacity at 100, preserve transparency and mask are not checked. The scale is 2, offset 0, and I turn on the invert option and simply hit OK. So right now we have our details or the information on this gray kind of layer. So just want to come and change the blending mode from normal and look for linear light. So just come and get linear light, and you'll get back the image the way it was meant to be. So the next thing that I want to do is going to coming right here and put these two layers in a group by hitting Control Command and left clicking on both layers and clicking Control or Command G on the keyboard, G for girl, G for go. So hit Control or Command G on the keyboard, and I'm going to name this layer to frequency separation. So like I said at the start of this tutorial, when you turn this on and off, you shouldn't be having any difference between the background or original image and our divided image, meaning we have successfully divided the frequencies, or we have successfully divided the image into two layers, that is the high frequency and the low frequency. So turn this back on and click and open your frequency separation group by clicking on this drop down icon or this arrow to open our group. So right now we're just going to be learning and understanding what skin retouching is all about and the tools we have to use. So this is where I have come and introduced to you what we know as the mixer brush tool. So a mixer brush tool is basically like any other kind of brush that is going to help us mix or blend the skin tones or the colors within the skin so that we can have even transitions within the skin. Let me repeat this. A mixer brush tool is a brush that is going to enable us blend the transitions or blend the colors within the skin tone so that with those blended transitions we have a very nice and even image with even skin tones and uniform skin tones. So that is what we're going to be doing. So we're going to come to the brushes and simply right click and get what we know as the mixer brush tool. And if at all you have an older version of Photoshop, you may find your mixer brush tool around here. So we have to set the brush accordingly so that it can give us the best results from our skin retouching process. So what we have to do, just come and make sure you click on the drop down, make sure it is a clean brush. We have two options right here. We have load the brush after each and every stroke, and we also have clean the brush after each and every stroke. So what we want to do, we just want the brush to be as clean as possible so that we don't carry color from one area that has different colors or skin tones to a different area, because that is going to be distorting the original colors within the image. So come and make sure the weight is below 10, and for this case I prefer 9%. Load is 75, mix at 90, and the flow 100. So let me just have to repeat these settings. It is a clean brush. Make sure the second option is checked, not the first one. The weight is 9%, load 75, mix 90, flow 100. And since we want to blend the transitions within the skin tones, remember skin tones or skin color is in the low frequency layer. So just come and click the low frequency layer to select it, and after selecting it, you have to come right here and also see this option which says sample all layers. So remember, when you click on sample all layers and you start painting, for example, on the image, it means your brush is also going to be sampling the textures or the details and painting them back in the low frequency layer. That's why we have this weird looking texture in the area that you have painted. So always make sure that you don't check this option. Make sure that it is unchecked before you do any retouching, and make sure that you are selected on the low frequency layer. So after doing all that, we now want to see the areas that have uneven skin tone transitions. And in order to see those areas, and I forgot to tell you, if at all your mixer brush tool is like this, or you're having a cross-like icon instead of a circle, make sure you turn off the caps lock key by simply clicking on the caps key on the keyboard. So make sure it is off. And in order to increase on the size of the mixer brush tool, you can use the open and the close brackets on the keyboard accordingly to adjust the size of the mixer brush tool. And as you're using it, you have to keep on adjusting it depending on which area and the size of the area you're trying to blend or transition the colors within the skin tone. So after doing that, we have now set the mixer brush tool and understood everything concerning the mixer brush tool. We just want to come to the high frequency layer, and now when you come to it, make sure that you click on the eye icon to deactivate that. So let me explain the reason as to why I have turned off the high frequency layer. The reason for doing this is because I want to see the right areas where I'm going to be painting. So you can see that this area has that kind of tiny black spot right here. Then we have another black area right here. You can see those uneven areas quite better than when you have this turned on. So that is one way of having a check layer, or a layer that is going to guide you through when you're trying to even out or blend the transitions within the skin tones. And after doing that, you're just going to turn this off and we start blending or evening out the skin tones. Alternatively, you can come and create a black and white layer, and that is going to be showing you the best results also as you're trying to even out the transitions within the skin tones. So in order to create that black and white layer, you can just come and select the high frequency layer and come to the adjustments and apply or create a black and white adjustment layer on top of that layer right there. So I'm just going to move this up so that you can see everything. So just come and create that black and white layer, and on top of that high frequency layer, just come and darken that. And when you darken it, right now you can see the areas you have to blend, but as you're doing this, make sure to come back and select the low frequency layer and you start painting to even out the skin tones. So I want to show you how you can do the evening out of the skin tones. I'm just going to delete this layer and use the method whereby I just turn this off and select the low frequency layer. So how to use the mixer brush tool? You have to adjust the size accordingly using the open and the close brackets on the keyboard to adjust the size of your mixer brush tool. And how to use it, like a setting, make sure the hardness is at 0, and now just come and start. You left click and hold down your cursor, or you left click and hold down and move your cursor depending on how that area is shaped. So since this area is shaped in this format, I'll be moving my mixer brush tool in such a direction, just like that. So reduce on the size, and if at all you're blending a tight area or a smaller area, reduce on the size and just blend it right there like that. So I'm simply left clicking and painting, holding down the left click on the mouse or the touchpad and simply doing this and painting just like that in those areas to blend or even out those transitions and have a really nice and beautiful transition within the skin tone. I know this may be looking a little bit off and weird because right now the image looks plastic and you may be wondering what I'm doing right now and you may not be loving the results. Remember, we are opting or aiming for a very natural and highly realistic skin texture in this image from this retouching process. But don't mind about all that, because when you come and turn on the high frequency layer, we have our textures back. So in order to see your progress, just turn on and off the group. You can see a before and after for just what we have done, and we still have the original details within the skin. So I just go and come and turn off the high frequency layer and also come and start blending the rest of the areas in the face. So just like that, and just come and paint through. I hope you're seeing what I am doing right now. Come to this other area and also paint just like that. And you can see that this is really looking nice and beautiful. So the more the image looks a little bit plastic and the more the colors are more prominent, the better your image is going to be turning out at the end of the retouching process. So don't mind about if at all it is looking so much like an oil painting. So the more it is going to be looking like an oil painting, remember the texture layer has been turned off and we are on the low frequency layer that we have just selected. So reduce on the size and just paint through the shadows in the nose area just like that, and come to this other side and also paint just like that. I hope you are seeing the results right in real time, I meant to say. So let's just paint through and even out these transitions within the skin tones, and make sure to have blended these colors quite well. So like I forgot to tell you, when you're retouching, don't over zoom in because you won't be seeing the effect quite well. So make sure that you are on a reasonable zoom, and you can use Control Command plus to zoom in and Control minus to zoom out your image as you're trying to retouch to look at it in a better way. So just come and paint through just like that, and I hope you can see the results. Reduce on the size and come to this area. Remember, we are doing skin retouching and we want to ensure that we have blended or worked on every area within the image. So just come and work on this area. Like I said, keep on checking on your progress by turning on the texture layer and see what you have so far. This is the before, after, and the image is really looking natural and beautiful. So we're just going to turn this back off and continue working with the blending of the skin tones. So let's just do this. Remember, I don't want to skip anything because I want you to follow along and understand each and everything in this very short tutorial. I don't want us to exceed an hour for this tutorial. So you can see for the first area before, after, you can come back and perfect or fine tune the areas by leaving the textures on to see the areas you haven't worked on in the image. So just come and do that. So just want to work on the rest of the body. Remember, some people tend to forget working on the rest of the body. So just going to turn this off and work on the rest of the body using a mixer brush tool. So I'm just going to come and work and blend colors that look alike. So we have colors that are like right in this area. Come and blend those colors and come this other side and also blend those colors. Reduce on the size and work on these shadows right here. I know it may be looking a little bit too plastic, but when I turn on the textures layer, you're going to be seeing everything with everything, all the information within the image quite well and better. So I'm just going to work on this area. I'm just keeping that highlight because that is a highlight and I don't want to blend it with the rest of the midtones that are surrounding it. So I'm just going to blend right there like that, and come to the collarbone and also work on it. Reduce on the size and now blend the highlight alone, and those areas where they are just transitioning within the highlights and the shadows. So just come and blend those areas just like that, and come and blend every area. Come to the collarbone and also work on that collarbone. Remember, we are doing skin retouching. That's why we don't want to leave an area that has skin untampered with or untouched when we are doing frequency separation. So let's just do this and we are going to be done. Remember, there are areas we may have missed out when using a mixer brush tool. That is where I have to show you the second technique that I use to refine the image every time I'm doing skin retouching on images using Photoshop. So I'm just going to turn this back on, and you can see we have the textures still intact in this area on the areas where we have just worked on. So we're just going to come and see the before, after. So right now we're just going to be fine tuning the areas we have just worked on by coming to the low frequency layer and selecting the lasso tool. So when you get the lasso tool, always make sure to put the feather between 20 and 25 pixels, and for this case I'm going to be using 22 pixels, because when we make a selection on the skin area, we want the edges of that selection to be as smooth as possible. So the best way is to have a median of 50 pixels, which is around 25. So 22 is going to be fine for me. And make sure the new selection mode is active and anti-alias has been selected. Zoom in right now and now fine tune the image even better by left clicking and holding down and moving your cursor to draw and select the skin area just like that. So make sure that you select the skin area and don't select the eyebrows. So make sure you don't select the edges, or don't even select close to the fabric of the model. So make sure you keep away from the hair and the fabric and the edges. So just like that, come back to filter, blur, and come to Gaussian blur. So we're just fine tuning this. So usually just come and click and move this up to a point when you feel like the skin texture is right for you. So around 24 we have a nice skin texture, and that looks really natural and realistic. But remember, we had the radius of 8. Another trick I can give you, just multiply that radius you used for your frequency separation or blurring out the details. Just multiply it by 3 and just type in that value. So I'm just going to type in 24. 8 by 3, you have 24, and type it in, and that is right. And we have the same results for the image. So we're just going to be applying it to the rest of the image. So just come and apply it on the eye area just like that. So you have to draw those shapes according to how an area is shaped in this case. So just come and draw that, right click and come to Gaussian blur. And when you feel like the effect is too much, you can simply reduce it. So for example, on the nose area, just come right click and come to Gaussian blur, but you shouldn't apply it on the overall nose, because it is going to be flattening or getting rid of this nice and beautiful highlight within the nose area. So apply it on different areas, like how we're using a mixer brush tool. And when it comes to the highlight area, and you also want to apply it right here, and you select the highlight area and you right click and come to Gaussian blur, it gets rid of that highlight. So make sure in every highlighted area, when you apply that lasso tool and Gaussian blur, you fade or reduce on the effect by right clicking and coming to fade Gaussian blur, and simply drop down the opacity to fade or reduce it. So we're just going to be applying it on the rest of the face. So I prefer to only apply this technique only on the face area. So right click and come to Gaussian blur, select another area. You can see I'm just drawing like I'm sculpting. Yeah, that's the right word to say. I'm basically trying to sculpt the face area just like that. Right click and come to Gaussian blur just like that. And when I click on another area, it will automatically deselect that selection. So just come and do that. And remember, we are not yet done with this tutorial. So do that, and I think we are done retouching the face area. So you can see the before and after, before after, but skin retouching can't be complete without the removal of blemishes from the image. So we're just going to come to the layer that contains the textures or the details within the skin, and come to our tool that is going to be removing blemishes. And for this case, I'm just going to be using the clone stamp tool. And after selecting it, make sure the hardness is at around 40. Mode is normal, opacity and the flow at 100. Make sure align is checked, and the sample has to be current layer because we don't want to sample information from the low frequency layer. Use Control Command plus right here to zoom in and start removing blemishes. And how this works, you have to sample and stamp a clean area over the blemish. So you sample by holding down the alternate key on the keyboard like that. Close the blemish and alternate. You left click on a clean area next to the blemish and simply left click to paste that clean area on that area. So I hope I'm clear with that. So I'm just going to be removing these blemishes from the rest of the photo, and after doing that, you are going to see how amazing this is going to be, because we are also going to be adding shape or dimension to this image by using a technique known as dodging and burning to fine-tune and later on learn how to do the final touches like the color grading and eye whitening. So stay tuned so that we can learn and do that very soon, and we learn and understand everything. Like I said, I don't want this to be an hour-long tutorial because most of you tend to retain and switch off quite and get bored within the process. So we're just cleaning up or removing blemishes or skin imperfections from the skin of a model, and when we're done doing all that, we're just going to be seeing how amazing and how convenient of the results we can have when it comes to skin retouching using frequency separation in Photoshop. And I hope you're really learning and understanding everything I'm trying to do. So I'm basically copying and pasting by holding down alternate and left clicking on the area close to the blemish that has clean skin, and left clicking over the blemish to get rid of it and clean it from the model's skin. So that is basically what I'm trying to do. So Command minus to zoom out to see the areas you haven't worked on, and come and work on those areas just like that. So we're just going to come to the lower areas and also eliminate the blemishes. Remember, blemish removal is going to contribute over 70% to your overall skin retouching process. So the more blemishes you forget in the image, the more people are going to look at you as a careless retoucher out there. So we just want to clean up these tiny imperfections, so just like that, and clean up these imperfections within the skin area. So we are done cleaning up the blemishes or removing the blemishes from the image, and this is the before after. So the next thing we want to do is adding shape or dimension to this image using dodging and burning, and we're going to be using curves adjustment layers. So just come to the adjustments and come to a curves adjustment layer, make a midpoint and brighten just like that, and make sure this is selected and hit Control Command I to hide or invert that effect. And remember, dodging and burning is more of enhancing the highlights and the shadows in the image. So we just brightened, and that is going to be dodging, and we are going to come back to the curves and make a midpoint, and this time around darken. Remember, when you're darken, you'll be enhancing the shadows. Make sure that this white mask is selected and hit Control or Command I on the keyboard, and you're going to name this to burn just like that. Select both by holding down Control and clicking on both, and hit Control Command G on the keyboard to group them. And we can name our group to D and B for dodging and burning. And you're going to open this, come to the brushes, and this time around get a normal brush with an opacity of around 10%. So just come and take that all the way down to 10%. I'm just going to type in 10% and hit enter. So we just want to enhance the highlights and the shadows in the image. So we're just going to come to the dodge first, make sure white is on top, and in order to reset, just come and click on these two small boxes and switch between black and white. Use X on the keyboard, make sure white is on top, and make sure a caps lock key is turned off to have your tool as a circle. And now we have to dodge and burn, and as you're doing the dodging and burning, make sure you don't over zoom in like this. Make sure that you are on a reasonable view ratio for the image. So you just want to enhance the bright areas just by painting right there. Come to the nose area and just enhancing that area. Come right to the cheekbone right here. This area was bright initially. We are simply left clicking and painting just like that to brighten up these areas just like that. Come to the collarbone. We have some bright areas right here, and brighten up on the shoulder right here. So you're basically trying to brighten up the areas. On the cheek right here, we have to brighten that area too, and brighten that too. So brighten up this area. We have a bright area. So you're basically brightening up those areas. Let's see the before and after for our dodging. So right now we just want to burn some areas. So come to burn, and we want to burn the shadows, for example on the cheekbone. So just come to the cheekbone and simply paint on the shadow areas to make them more pronounced. So you're basically trying to add shape or dimension to the model's face by using dodge and burn, so that the image doesn't look flat. Remember, as we are doing frequency separation, the image turns out to look a little bit flat and boring. That's why we just want to add shape or dimension by dodging and burning the image. So this is the before and after for the dodging and burning, and the image is now looking like it has life brought back into it. So after we have done the dodging and burning, frequency separation, everything, we just want to see what we have within the before and after. So hold down the alternate and click on the background layer. This is the before, after, before, after, before, after. So just want to do one final thing, that is creating a stamp visible layer and doing the color grading, the final color grading, and the eye and teeth whitening. So you're just going to come and create a stamp visible layer by holding down Shift Alternate Command E on the keyboard, or Shift Alternate Control E on the keyboard, and coming right here to filter, camera raw filter, and it is going to open the camera raw filter. And before you can do anything, we just want to color grade the skin tones to look quite better or even better. So we are going to scroll all the way down to our color mixer option, or the hue, saturation, and luminance option. And hue is more of changing a given color to either target to make it look like the color up on top of it or below it. Saturation is the intensity of a color, and luminance is the brightness or darkness of a given color. So for this case, I feel like I want to darken the oranges in the image so that the skin tones can really look more pronounced and richer. So I'm just going to take this luminance slider down just a little bit to around -19 and brighten up my yellows so that the yellows can stand out even more. Then come to the hue slider, and remember I told you hue changes a color depending. When I take the oranges up, it's going to be making the oranges look more of yellow, and when I take the oranges down, it's going to make the oranges look more of the reds. That is how basically this works. So I just want to make my oranges look a little bit red. So I'm just going to move the oranges towards the left hand side to make it look more of red in color, just like that. And I'm going to come to the saturation and simply reduce on the saturation just to around -7, and also desaturate or remove the reds just a little bit so that I can have a more richer skin tone. This is the before and after, before, after. So I feel like I should add a given hue, or hue my reds towards the oranges slightly towards around 3. So this is the before and after, before, after. So the next thing I want to do the eye whitening for this model. So just simply click on the eye of a model with your zoom tool selected in the camera raw filter, or you can use Control or Command plus to zoom into the eye. So just come to what we know as the adjustment brush tool in Photoshop. So how this works, In order to remove yellows from the white area of the eye, you have to come and move this slider towards the opposite of yellow, which is blue. So just going to move that to around negative 23. And since we have some greens within the white area of the eye, the opposite of green is magenta. Move this towards the magenta side up to around 68. And since we want to brighten up the white area of the eye, just move the highlights to around 5 and also the whites to around 5. And since we have other random colors within this area, we are just simply going to desaturate these colors to around negative 60 and simply left click to paint over. Remember, only paint over the white area of the eye, just like that, because when you paint over a skin, it is going to remove color since this brush is desaturated. So Ctrl Z to undo, just paint over the white area. So you have to be careful and you take your time. You can use the same technique to do the teeth whitening if at all you want to do some whitening of the teeth in Photoshop. So just do that. Hold down the space bar and simply left click and move your cursor or your mouse towards another direction and come and whiten the second eye, just like that. To do the eye whitening, just like that. So this is very nice and simple and easy to follow. So we are done whitening the eyes. You're just going to see the before and after, before, after. You're just going to open the image back into Photoshop to do the final color grading. So in order to do this, we're just going to come and create a black and white adjustment layer within our Photoshop and come and change that into the blend mode into multiply and simply come to the opacity and simply reduce on the opacity, just like that. So just going to take the opacity slightly down. So I think at around 13, that looks good. We're just going to also desaturate the image even more using a black and white adjustment layer by simply coming to a black and white and simply taking down the opacity, just like that. And we're just going to desaturate it slightly, not too much. So I think at around, we're just going to leave it at around 9. 9 looks good. And now we have a more richer and better skin tone. Come to selective color and select it and come to the blacks. Simply take the blacks up, slide it around 2. And we're going to also come to the reds. Since the skin tone is within the reds and the oranges, we're just going to take out the yellows from the red channel slightly and come to the yellows and also do the same and desaturate the yellows slightly. So we are done color grading the image. Let's see the before and after so far. This is the image initially, before, after, before, after. I hope you can see how nice and beautiful the image has turned out to be. So next thing is going to be saving the image so that it doesn't change in color after you have been able to edit or save it. And in order to do that, you're just going to come to File, Export, and come to Export As. And as this opens up, if at all you're watching and following and loving this, don't forget to hit the like button on this video. So make sure the format is in JPEG. The quality is at 100%. I'm going to leave these the way they are. So come to Resample and change it from bicubic automatic to bicubic sharper. And after doing that, if at all you don't want the image to change in color, after you have been able to edit it in Photoshop, just come to the color space and convert to sRGB and also embed the color profile. So basically that is it. And after doing that, simply come to export in order to export the image the best way possible. So let's just wait for this to load. And after it has loaded, just come and hit export and choose a destination where you want to save the image. So for that case, I'm just going to save it on the desktop. Simply hit save and the image is going to be saved in that very folder. So this has been it for today's tutorial. And if at all you have loved this, don't forget to like this video, don't forget to subscribe. If at all you are watching and haven't subscribed this channel, Ronnix from ronnixphotography. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in yet more amazing tutorials. And don't forget to keep practicing and keep creating.